to myself as the clerk to open the meeting. As such, I should say to anybody who is present that this meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the council website for up to 2 years. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting for your name, the content of what you say, and your image to be broadcast and stored to the council website. If any member, officer or member of the public addressing the committee has concerns with this, please contact Committee Services Officer immediately. For those at home viewing the webcast, I would like to inform you that if you look above the video, you will see a Resources tab. Select this and the link to the agenda will appear on the right-hand side. This will allow you to open the agenda in PDF form and follow the discussion and debate. Can I please remind members that they need to turn their microphone on when speaking, otherwise what you say will not be captured on the webcast. Please can I also ask that members turn their microphones off when not speaking to avoid microphone feedback. Members are also reminded that the public health advice is that face covering should be worn at all times unless exempt, except when speaking, or indeed drinking a cup of tea. Members, it therefore falls to me to invite you to nominate one of your number as chair for the forthcoming year. Councillor Hayes.
I nominate Councillor Tony Cox.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Hayes?
Councillor Steve Williams.
Are there any other nominations? Councillor.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate for the role of the chair, Councillor Phil Gilchrist. Thank you.
Are there any other nominations? No, as it's between two candidates, can I ask those in favour of Councillor Cox to express your vote by showing your hand? Thank you. 1, 2, 3. 3. And those in favour of Councillor Gilchrist? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, Councillor Gilchrist, can I invite you to take the chair then, please?
Thank you, members. Thank you for proposing, seconding me, and for those who supported me. As there was a range of opinion in the committee, I want to assure members that throughout the year I will do my utmost to take account of all the views expressed by members, since we are here to serve the community, and the Constitution is the document we work from, and the guidance from the LGA and other bodies is that we should work always courteously and politely, and I certainly intend to do that throughout the year. Can I now ask, as chair, can I ask for nominations to the role of vice chair, please? Councillor Williamson.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Paul Stewart, thank you.
Through you, Chair, I would like to second Paul Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Fowkes. Are there any other nominations, please? Councillor Cook.
Yes, I'd like to put forward Councillor Tony Cox in the role of Vice Chair.
Yeah. Is that seconded, please?
Chair, if I can, I'd like to thank Councillor Cook for his support. It's appreciated. I think it wasn't a major shock to me that I didn't get the vote against yourself this evening. It was more of a shock and the opportunistic way I was deposed last year, if I'm 100% honest, after the amount of work I put in delivering the committee system, but there we go. To be honest, the Labour Party were the only group that expressed an interest in the Vice Chair. I think it's important that all of the groups should be wanting to actually be the chair of an important regulatory and statutory meetings such as this and committees such as this, but they wish to apply for the vice chair. They expressed the interest on Monday, and I don't think there's any point in going to a vote. I'm happy for them to have the vice chair if that's what they wish.
For that statement, Councillor Cox. So as things stand, we have a nomination, only one nomination for the post of vice chair, and then Councillor Paul Stewart has been put forward and seconded. So can I see the members in support of that, please? Right, are there any against or abstentions? Any against or abstentions? On no. Right, thank you. So Councillor Paul Stewart has been approved as vice chair of the committee. I've got some notes from Mr McCourt. Yes, I've got apologies for absence, so if I may move on to that. Councillor Paul Stewart has sent his apologies. I understand that Adrian Jones is deputising for Paul this evening, so welcome, Adrian. I've had apologies also from Councillor McLaughlin. It's clear that Councillor Hayes is substituting. Are there any other apologies, please? Oh, thank you. Now, from the independent members, we received an apology from Graham Kerr. Mr Sharples informs me. And I'd like to welcome our two independent members, Professor Jones and Mr McCosh. So thank you for attending. Do feel to take part and make comments as any other member would, because you are members, as the same rights as everyone else. I have to move on to members' declarations of interest. Should I just explain before I do so that because I wear a hearing aid, because I have great difficulty wearing a hearing aid and keeping my hearing aid in the right place whilst wearing a mask, and taking my mask off to speak and pulling my hearing aid out of my ears, you forgive me if I don't wear a mask. If any members, I see most members have now put masks on for the meeting, I hope you understand the difficulty that I would have if I was constantly fiddling with both. And I'm grateful for your understanding over that. I did take a lateral flow test this morning, so I was all right as of 8 o'clock this morning. Who knows what might have happened during the day, but so far so good. Can I ask, if we go to member declarations of interest, is the third item I have. Are there any members who wish to disclose pecuniary interests in relation with any items on the agenda? And if so, would you like to state the nature of the interest? Does anyone have any? I'm not seeing any signs of signals, so none to record then, as far as I can tell, Mr Sharples. Now, the last time I looked at the notes, we got to check on the accuracy of the minutes. So the minutes are of the meeting that took place, and I'm going back to the 24th of February. Doesn't time pass? I wondered if the members of certainly have read those. We're invited to improve the accuracy of the minutes, especially for those who were present at the time. Any members like to move that they're accurate, please? Thank you, Councillor Christian.
I'll move, Councillor Goldcrest.
Thank you, I caught that. And the seconder, I'm seeing who was present. Could be anyone. Anyone like to do that as second? I think I was present, so I was chairing it. So, Councillor Williams.
Councillor Steve Williams.
Would you like to second? Thanks very much. So, are members content that they're an accurate record? So, yes, it appears to be the case. Thank you very much. Now, the notes I have say that no questions, statements or notices or petitions have been received. There were none when the note was prepared, and there are none since then, so are none to receive or consider. So on our agenda, item number 6 is the proposed members' code of conduct. Now, this has been doing the rounds for some time, and we've had various reports at various stages, but Mr. Court, you'd love to bring us up to date on where it's up to, wouldn't you? And tell us about the guidance we haven't yet got from the LGA and all the other things that are still to be looked at, please. Thank
Love to is exactly the expression I was looking for, Chair. Thank you. Members, a very short-potted history for those who are playing catch-up with this is that some years ago, 2012, after the Localism Act, each council was free to adopt its own code of conduct, provided that that code accorded with the principles laid down in the Act based on what are known as the Nolan principles. There was at the time some examples roving around, and if we then fast forward to the review of the situation in local government by the Committee on Standards in Public Life, or what was originally known as the Nolan Committee, it said that councils had drifted far and wide from what might be considered accepted or best practice in their codes, and recommended that the Local Government Association produced a model code as a standard by which councils should adopt. There were several other recommendations which have been to this committee before, and you as a committee feel that this council accords with all of those best practice recommendations so far as you can, because some of those recommendations were to central government and would require legislation. The Local Government Association ran some consultation this time last year. This committee submitted comments individually to that consultation, and we were able to report back later in the year that the LGA had predominantly heard that, as the comments you'd made were quite in common with those made by other councils. A model has therefore been produced. That model, as in all LGA documents, is to meet more than one audience. So those such as this council that predominantly kept the old mandatory code because you were used to it and it was fairly straightforward, and those that ditched the code at all and have since disfavoured, fallen out of use with the terminology within it. As discussed here previously, that model has been discussed with the other authorities within the Liverpool City region, including the various combined authorities, and the result of that was some tinkering with the code to fill in some of the gaps that were left, but also to bring the language into line with what you as authorities were used to. That has since gone to each of the councils concerned. The election kind of got in the way of organising a get-together of members, but there was minimal tinkering, and what tinkering there was has been run past the advisors to the Local Government Association, those who were actually commissioned to draft the code. They're happy with that wording, and a couple of the councils have already adopted this code, with others due to shortly. Behind the code is guidance, which is awaited. I have submitted comments to the drafts that have been shared with me. Those were presented to the Local Government Association a week before last, and we're yet to see what they have done with those, but we expect over the next weeks and months to have that guidance. It will now be more than just guidance on the code. It will be a full suite of guidance, which includes comments on protocol and so forth. And you might like to note that the your protocol for dealing with standards complaints has been submitted to the LGA as one they might wish to follow, including all of the additions that were made by members and now past former members of this committee. So that will be expected shortly. The shared training on the code for all members has been established. We have engaged Beth and Evans through the combined authority to provide that training. You will know her. She has delivered training here before and delivered chairs training only recently, is a highly respected trainer in this area. It's just a matter of settling on a date with her once all of the council meetings have taken place. There is some question to be discussed with the mayor as to whether or not to hold the full council meeting expected here shortly, because we're now in the pre-election period, and of course the roadmap has been extended. That's the case in some other councils as well. So it may be that we establish the training for September. Sorry if that was a lot, Chair, but for new members of the committee, I thought it worth going over the history.
thank you. It's within the documents we have the bits in the appendix that we're asked to adopt to go as far as page 30. The LGA one is Appendix B. I'm just going to see if there are members got questions or comments. Are there any questions or comments, please? Councillor Hayes. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, just at 3.5, Phil, you helpfully give us a précis as to what's changed, and I think the answer is not much, which is good. But in terms of the gifts and hospitality threshold increasing to £50, I just wondered what the thinking of that was, behind that was, and is it something that other authorities are doing?
The threshold for gifts and hospitalities in your current code is also £50, so that hasn't changed.
So it's never been £25, I've just misunderstood that.
It may have been in the dim and distant past.
Right, okay.
Quite frankly, I haven't met any councillor who's had £25.50 or £2.50, but
Yes, I recall it being £25 in the past. It is getting dimmer, but there we are. Any other members with questions, please, or comments? No, I'm looking around the room. No, there don't appear to be. I noticed in the report, Mr. McCourt, in 311, there's a suggestion that we have an annual light touch health check, which presumably will be some way down the line. We're just adopting it and seeing what other people do.
yes, Chair. One of the recommendations of the Committee on Standards in Public Life is that the Members' Code of Conduct is reviewed each year. As the Local Government Association has undertaken to review their national model code, no point doing it twice, so whatever they say I will report to you, and you can just pick up on that and pick up any comments from members on its use at the same time.
Right, thank you very much. Now we are asked to adopt this code, so I'm quite happy to move its adoption from the chair, but would look for a seconder who would like to do that. Councillor Williamson, thank you. This is proposed by me, seconded by Councillor Williamson. Can I see members in favour of adopting the code of conduct, please, as set out in the appendix? That looks from all the members. Yeah, thank you. Approved. Thanks very much. Now, I'll just get the next item on the agenda is the change in governance arrangements now and implementation, pages 51 to 56. And Mr. Fox is down on my right, who's going to take us through this, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The report before you this evening is essentially divided into three parts: implementation of the committee programme, an update on training, and then finally information in respect to constitution review and work programme. I can just highlight a few points, if I may. In respect to the implementation of the committee programme, members will obviously be aware that we've been able to run a full committee programme since annual council meeting in September 2020. Up to May, they were meetings by remote means, which I think most would agree were on the whole successful, or as successful as they could have been. We've now transitioned obviously into meetings in person, and that in itself has brought about a lot of challenges, both for members and officers. But I think testament to the last 3 weeks, they too have been to some degree considered successful. I'd like to thank Floor Pavilion staff in particular, as well as colleagues in Democratic Services for getting the meetings up and running. The second part of the report relates to training. I think when the decision was taken by the council to change its governance arrangements, one of the key strands in terms of the project management of that was training. That was both for members and officers. Formed an absolute crucial part of that, and we did lots of training over the course of last year. Things that I'd like to highlight for you that I'm particularly proud of in terms of developments are we now have an online training resource library for members, which you can all access through the members portal. On a directorate level, we've restructured Democratic Services to some extent to make more officer availability and provision to support members. And we've also created what we call the Report Author Support Group. The role of that group is essentially to QA all reports that are filtering through to committees so that you get the best reports possible to support you in your decision making and they're consistent. I think finally, I would highlight in terms of training the new member induction programme this year. That was run pretty much fully remotely for the first time. Not ideal, I would say, but it did present opportunities at the same time in that we were able to capture a lot of the training that took place on those Teams meetings and record those sessions, and that is what has gone into the library. But I'll be doing a full review of that in the months ahead and submitting a report to the member steering group. Moving on, the final part of the report, if we could divide it into two, relates to the Constitution and your own individual work programme. There are a number of issues outstanding, I would say, from the committee last year, Chair, and that I know the working group will wish to look at. That's the petition scheme, and the committee's already charged me with responsibility for going away and reviewing that scheme, which I will do. There was mention of further consideration being given to the media guidelines, and that members would like to have a discussion in respect to that. And I think a number of members, a few around this table this evening, have highlighted that they'd like the governance working group to further look at the role of the partnerships committee moving forward. Finally, Chair, for May, I would remind committee that there's an outstanding request from Council from last year for the independent remuneration panel to give consideration to a number of issues at the appropriate time. They are listed in section 3.3 of the report. I would personally say that now is a good time to certainly start looking at a number of those issues. I've had preliminary conversations with the chair of the independent remuneration panel, and should committee resolve this evening that they wish to, he's more than happy to call meetings and do some of that work over the summer. If any members wish to add any items to the list in section 3.3, please do so. So the recommendations, Chair, are that you are asked to consider and comment on the report and identify members to sit on the governance working group for Phil and I to work with on the issues identified in the report. And then I would ask you to resolve for the Director of Law and Governance to convene meetings of the Independent Remuneration Panel with a view to us reporting back to you in September or into the autumn. Thank you, Chair.
Fox. Councillor Fox and I attended the day for induction of new members, and they were very enthusiastic, keen to learn on what they'd suddenly taken on. But I think the key thing that came across there was that all were committed to trying to make life better for their communities and understood the role of councillor and the importance of public service. So I think it'd be useful to have their feedback that's mentioned in the report when it's convenient. And we've been asked to set up a governance working group. And the issue, of course, this committee, because of the guidelines on size and access to all parties, has a particular composition. Do officers have a view on the size of the governance working group? What it might consist of? How many?
Chair, we don't have a view, only to say that the previous member working group was one member from each of the groups, and that set something of a precedent where things were in contention, and it was kind of a weighted vote, if you like, reflected of place at committee. But as yourself and as Councillor Cox will testify, there were disagreements of that extent were far and few between them, was largely collaborative.
Thank you very much for the reminder, Mr McCourt. We spent many happy hours, and Councillor Cox and others, in front of something like 4 computer screens when we could go in your office working through this, and there was a degree of collaboration, and I think it's fair that members of the committee should recognise all the work that was done by Councillor Cox and colleagues to get this system on the road. So I'm grateful for that. We've been asked about the size and composition then. Are members content that the working group should be, as described as last year, one from each group?
Chair, if I may, if you're moving that, I'm happy to second it. I think it's the collegiate way forward. Right. I'd also say, just for Steve, on 3.3, Steve, if we could, as a catch-all, other constitutional items that may arise throughout the year to be discussed in that working group. And the only other thing I was going to say before we do that, if I can, Chair, Steve, if you could just enlighten us on page 53 again at the top, remodelling of the member steering group and more frequent meetings of that group. What what do you think we're missing at the minute, and what's the aim of more frequent meetings for that particular group, if you could?
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. This committee agreed in February essentially to merge, and I might get the names wrong, but it was the ICT steering group and what was the member learning and development group. Two reasons: A, I thought it made good sense and members agreed, and B, demands on member time. So the drive for me now is to have more regular meetings of that group. So they will be quarterly. There's a report later on the agenda asking for your agreement to appointing to those groups. So once we've got names, I've got a provisional date for July. Two key things that I want to work with members on. One is the ongoing programme of member training and development, making best use of the member training budget. Two is to review the new member induction. As the Chair just alluded to, we'll be undertaking a survey of those new members and how they found it, and that's the group that I'll feed back through. And then finally, just for a member engagement and control over the work that we're doing over the course of the year generally. Opportunities, as alluded to in my report, the portal is now up and running. I see that member steering group as being the voice of members, and we'll be regularly reporting in on the portal, both from a member perspective, but also in terms of functionality. And I'll feed that back to ICT colleagues, but also just as a sounding board as much as anything else. There will come a point in time as well where we will need to review the use of the Surface Pros that are sat in front of you. They've got a shelf life probably of about 4 to 5 years, so I'd imagine in the next year or so we'll be asking members about whether they wish to continue with a Surface Pro or an alternative piece of kit. Thank you, Chair.
Just going back to where we were then, I suggested that my understanding of the feeling of the committee is that we should carry on with the all-party approach to the working group. So I've moved that from the chair, and it was seconded by Councillor Cox. And the members agree with that carrying on in that context? Yep. Okay. Yes, thank you. And then the second aspect we were asked to look at, we're asked to nominate members, so the members will get names presumably to Mr. Fox or Mr. McCourt, so we know who will serve on that. The second part of the recommendation deals with the items in 3.3, and we didn't go into great detail discussing that. Are there any members who want to comment on anything that's in 3.3? Councillor Cox touched on them, but are there any other members who want to comment on that before we move to setting up those sessions? Yes, thank you, Councillor Steve Hayes.
Just a clarification for the members' working group. Are substitutions allowed, deputies?
Check on that in case there's problems. Mr. Fox is nodding sagely, saying there can be. Looks like the answer is yes. Thanks very much. Thank you for that, Steve. So the second recommendation is, oh, sorry, Janet, I'm sorry I didn't see you out the corner of my eye. Councillor Williamson.
It's okay. It's so used to looking forward, aren't you, at a screen when you're sharing online that you forget. It was just some clarification on the member steering group. So that's going to, part of the remit will be around member learning and development, will it? Is that right?
That's correct, Chair,
okay.
yes.
It's just a plea, really. I know when I applied for training back in the day, the amount of hoops I had to jump through to get onto some very minor training courses. So I would make a plea maybe, or even represent my group on it, that I think when people request training, it's generally because they want to develop themselves professionally and personally. So that would be it. So it's a valuable group, yeah.
Perhaps Mr. Fox just want to clarify the procedure. We see copies of forms. We invite members that haven't filled in forms to make sure they fill in forms, and they were considered by the group. There have been times when, shall we say, occasionally there was some debate about whether a matter was appropriate or worth the journey or other things. But are there any criteria, guidelines for what members should look at when considering these forms? Or is it very much not say made up on the night, but things that we generally want to consider are all in our minds anyway, so we don't need a huge tome to give us advice? Perhaps you just want to comment.
Yes, Chair. We did have a meeting of the member steering group in April or late March. where they agreed just that criteria, Chair, that members would work through. In summary, an application will come in from any member, typically via the group office manager. It will be circulated by email to all members of that steering group for comment and approval, hopefully. At this present time, all requests for training have been approved unanimously. The group has agreed, and I'll be reminding them of this in July when they do meet. We would call a meeting if there ever was dissent, so that members could thrash it out and have a conversation about it. Ultimately, I will always act on the instruction of the member steering group in terms of the budget management of that. But yes, Chair, in summary, there is a criteria.
And just to clarify, Chair, because of course that's not a committee, so the governance is that in effect delegated authority rests with myself through the office of Mr. Fox to approve or not approve the member request. What we then do is consult the members of the working group. That was established some time ago in case there's a request comes forward that's out of the ordinary. It is quite rare to say no, but there have been examples, none come to mind immediately, of say somebody seeing a very expensive course that might be delivered in another way and so that would be nice, I'd like to go on that conference. And the comments came back, well actually is that the best use of the money and is that the best use of your time? Can the training be delivered in another way? And the way that was resolved at the time was a discussion with that member involved who said actually yes, I understand that point, and withdrew their application. If anything particularly contentious came out of that process and procedure, it will come back here.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. Does that cover the queries that you had, Janet? Thanks very much. Right. As we were asked as part 2 to request that Director of Law and Governance convenes meetings of the Independent Remuneration Panel to consider the issues raised in section 3.3 of the report with a view to submitting an outcomes report to this committee in autumn 2021. So if I move that from the chair, have I got a seconder, please? Yes, thank you, Chris. Councillor Cook. And can we see members in support of that then, please? Yep, members are in support of it. None against? No, none against. So that's been approved, thanks so much. So that will be sorted, organised, put in hand, and we look forward to the process being undertaken. The item 8 on the agenda is... Sorry, Councillor Fox, I couldn't look over there. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you? I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. It was just the comments made about moving from, the meetings online to the current arrangements we had, and I think we need to congratulate the staff for putting those arrangements in. I think most people thought, how are we going to do it? How's it going to work? And just to echo how well we've done, I believe we are getting inquiries. Well, we certainly had an inquiry from the Transport Committee for Liverpool City Region, aka Mersey Travel, who are asking us to host their meeting here. So it would appear that on a Merseyside basis, we are best in class, which I think we're always good at knocking ourselves, but we should always congratulate ourselves when we're seen as doing something right. So congratulations on that. And the other matter is, and it's only a question, and it doesn't need a resolution. We get a lot of comments from our members about councillors being in almost a different position than everyone else in terms of well-being, and well-being doesn't seem to sit in this committee. And where does councillor well-being sit anywhere? And it's not a political point, but we've seen one member who has resigned, and if you read the sentiments behind that, it was the impossibility she found of balancing work life and the family life and the council life. So it is an issue for members, it's an issue for any employee, and it doesn't seem to be a mechanism for members to discuss that or where to go with problems. So if we can just have a little think, Phil and the officers, of where that would sit within the council agenda, because we should take seriously our own well-being, because we serve the people as officers do and as everyone else does. So just somewhere for that to sit, and if this is the appropriate committee, we could quite easily put it as some sort of, you know, addendum at a later date. It's just that it doesn't seem to have a home anywhere. We all, you know, you hear lots of moans and groans from members, but nowhere to actually vent that or have an opinion or improve things. So if we just bear that in mind for future agenda items, we might be able to do something positive.
I'll just invite Mr McCourt to comment on that, or Mr Fox. Possibly group office managers might collect some information or evidence from members. I think it's quite right to point out the strains on members that the public don't see. Because I know that members and officers are working late, long hours trying to always tackle the budgetary problems we have, and officers and members have been worked around the situation we're in to try and keep the democratic process going. So can I just have any comments, if you've got any, Mr McCourt, please?
If I may, Chair, I think from this side we recognise the stresses and strains placed upon members, as it is one of the reasons why you are 66 members and not 30 members, and you have 3-member wards, and a lot of those discussions came out of being able to share work and the pastoral work that's or the pastoral care that's required for councillors. That lies in a number of places, informally within groups and group leaders. But if there were a formal home for that, I would suggest it's here, because the Constitution is the workings of the council. The member development, member support sits here, and indeed it is democratic services and member services is the title of the department that sits within my directorate. So if there is that support here, and indeed we're having a conversation at the moment around, you have the group office managers, but is that working? In particular, there is an issue for chairs of committees who have now taken on something of a role and find themselves also as quite properly but spokespeople for the council in the community, and therefore are attracting a number of emails, wanted and sometimes unwanted, and sometimes anything other than civil society as part of that. And the support that we can put in place for chairs to assist with that is, for example, one of the conversations we're having. So that I would suggest group leaders and that member support steering group is the first place to have those conversations, and then bring anything formal here. Thank you.
That covers the point. We'll probably, I'll just check. I've got Krista and then Janet. So I'll take Chris, have I?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to echo Councillor Folkes' comments about member wellbeing, and also the compliments he paid the Floral Pavilion staff for running this meeting so effectively in difficult conditions, and also Steve Fox's team for managing the IT side of the remote meeting so well. But in connection with the wellbeing of members, you know, this is really a comment of protest against central government's decision to force members' councils to, you know, have so-called face-to-face meetings, when clearly, in so many respects, they're far less satisfactory than the remote ones, even for meetings such as this in public. The fact that we're face-to-face, but we can hardly see the faces of the members on the other side. The fact that it involves, you could say, unnecessary risk, while we're meant to be wearing masks here, which wouldn't be if we were at home. Unnecessary travel, you know, time. I've been to 4 meetings, an hour each way, bus and train. You know, that's 8 hours, and the fatigue aspect of it too, you know, and of course the environmental aspect as well. So, you know, I'm just saying that, you know, congratulations to all the people who put these meetings together, but I just want to voice that protest that I feel many people would agree. You know, the LGA magazine for June, all of the different groups are basically saying, you know, the government made a very bad call in making us meet in this way. Okay, I'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. I'll call Janet on. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to echo what Steve said there about member wellbeing. I feel, I know this has been something I've been looking at. Well, it's been something that's been important to me for a good few years now. I feel that because we're not direct employees of the council, there aren't really any formal structures in place, whereas there are for people who work for the council. I feel that you know, there's the potential for burnout with members, and unfortunately my observations, I can only speak for my own group, and it seems to be women that are impacted to the detriment because they have families, etc., or that they're the primary carer for children, or elderly parents or grandchildren. And I just feel that we need to do our level best to make the council for councillors the best place of work that it can be, really. And so I would endorse very heavily what Steve's just said. I do feel that we need to work on that, and the culture here where we treat each other with respect, and that links into the initial item around code of conduct, with respect and kindness, and also bear in mind that people are here mainly with the same goal in mind. We might have different ideas about how we reach that, but we are all here for the good of the community. So I think there's a wider issue, and I'm pleased to see that it's placed on the remit. It's put on this committee tonight. Thank you.
Mr McCourt's indicating to take stuff on that on board. I was reflecting the other day, which shows my age, that in the Bevington Council, which is now represented by 12 Wirral councillors, there were 30 councillors, 10 aldermen and 4 county councillors on top before local government reorganisation. So the work that they were all doing, even though the world has changed in terms of what we actually run, the things they were doing now fall to a substantially smaller number of members. But Mr McCourt, you indicated you'd like to come back on a point or two. Thank you.
It was only one point, Chair, but I will echo that I know the conversations ebb and flow over unitary councils and shire counties. I think we've noted before, if there is an advantage to shire counties, and I go so far as to say there probably aren't many, it is that there would be a town and parish council, a district council, a county council, and workload to spread for members, even if that becomes confusing and costly for members of the public. The only comment I was wishing to say, Chair, is you are yet to come to that point, item 10, which is appointment of panels, and that may be an opportunity to expressly add to the terms of remit of the member support working group the pastoral care of members as a specific item on that. You may wish to make that part of its terms of reference expressly when you get there.
When we get there, if you may, and please remind us, we're not likely to forget it, I would say, frankly. But have we covered all the comments? Tony, please, Councillor Cox, please come in.
Thanks, Chair. Just to pick up on what Jeanette and Steve have both said, I do recognise what Steve's saying, and you know, on some level I agree. But I think Jeanette has nailed it, to be honest, which is the issue is the fact that we're not actually employees, and that's where it comes. So there isn't a whereas officers clearly have there's a you have a support network there, I suppose, as any employee does in any other walk of life, and you have a HR department, and you have ways to escalate issues along those lines. But I did read the reasons that your colleague gave for resigning, and well, to be fair, Jeanette, it wasn't because of I didn't see anything in there because she said it was the way she'd been treated per se. It was purely workload, wasn't it? Now I think what we need to do, you know, you've got your party, and let's be fair, you know, they are your friends as well as your colleagues within the party, and they are there to be lent on, not just the actual council officers, if you like. But I mean, I think what we have a duty of care to do is to explain to people exactly what they're actually coming into when they become a councillor, because I'm still of the opinion that people come in and have absolutely no real expectations as to what the role is going to actually entail. You know, there's numerous facets to it. This obviously the governance side of it, which you know nothing about really before you get here. The political side, you might have an inkling because you've been involved clearly to get elected, and you know it's not just a legislative job, is that we don't just turn up and vote on stuff. There's a massive amount of work in the community that goes in as well, so it is a three-pronged job, and I think people really need to be well informed before they actually come into it, because it's not for everyone. It's simple as that. I'm not just saying that we don't deserve support on some level, of course we do, but it's not for everyone, and that needs to be better communicated, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Yes, I think the public probably do understand that the work councillors do, but I think there isn't a member here who isn't replying to emails at 7 in the morning or 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. And that's not seen, but it has to be done and is done as best we can within the resources and time we all devote as individuals to it. And especially when issues blow up that need attention, especially budgetary issues that we're considering at the moment that require work on. Based on what Councillor Fawkes said earlier, I would like to move this committee places on records its thanks to officers and staff for the arrangements made to continue the democratic process. Second for that, please? Thank you very much. Members content with that formula? Approved? Yeah, thank you very much. So, Mr McCourt, please convey that to the teams that work in the background. We do appreciate what's been done. We recognise where we are, thanks to the government's view on the court case and the action taken on behalf of councils. We will carry on working as best we can in the circumstances. Thank you.
Absolutely, Chair. I will pass that on.
Item 8. And item 8 is the flag flying protocol. I was a member of this committee when it considered the issue in 2016, and I remember many contributions from Councillor Blakely, and we spent a great deal of time working on the protocol, which I think was approved by all parties. There is a discussion that we can have about it, whether we want to have the working group reviewing the flag flying protocol, or whether at this stage we think things are all right as they are, but we look at more detail of the government guidance when we get it. But I'll now open that up to members for hear views on, please. Thank you. Who would like to chip in first? Flag flying protocol. Councillor Fawkes.
Yeah, Chair. I mean, all protocols and all procedures are worthy of review at periodical times, and this fits into that. It looks like, you know, it's fairly detailed and fairly understandable to the public. But I have no objections to it being part of the work programme for the year for a look at. But it seems fairly well placed for the modern day. And you say that there's government guidance on its way. So we'd have to review it in the light of government guidance, wouldn't we? So it's work in progress, I would suggest, Chair. But as being new to the committee, I'm not, you know, that was my first impression. Is it looks fit for purpose, but everything is worth reviewing if we've got time to do it. So.
I suppose the wording I come up with is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But you know, I've taken many things apart and bits of engines and thought, what's that bit? Anyway, Janet, please, Councillor Williamson.
Just to agree, really, I think members have got quite enough on their collective plates without another members' working group reviewing a policy that's in place. I think it's a nationally prescribed policy anyway, isn't it? So I think that would be not a good use of, given the discussion we just had about workload, I think this would not be a good use of members' time, if I'm being honest, because the policy's there and it's nationally prescribed. And I don't think we differ from many other councils, do we? If maybe Phil or Steve could answer that one.
What do you know about other councils and flags, Mr Fox?
I can't answer that question directly. I think what I would take away from this is I will do exactly that. I will make sure that our policy conforms with the national guidance and just make sure it's aligned with it. If members are pretty much satisfied that as it's written, you're happy with it, I'll only come back to committee chair or the working group if there's anything that I think I need to come back to you with. Thank you.
Right. Yes, sorry. Councillor Chris Cook, I'm sorry. I think I saw Chris, but Steve, did you have your hand up first? You did? Yeah. Well, fine. Sorry I didn't see you. Councillor Hayes, please. Paul. All right, I'm not looking that way. Well, Chris, I'm going to call you, and then I'll get Paul.
Thanks.
Chris.
Thanks for that, Paul. Yeah.
We're all very generous around here.
Yeah, we are, aren't we? Yeah. I mean, I agree with what's been said about not wanting to set up a working group to look at this when essentially the protocol's clear and it's based on the law. We can't do an awful lot about it, even though we may want to, because I mean, with my sort of local government perspective and bias, I might be inclined to challenge, for example, on page 59, 9.9, equality implications. It says, there are no equality implications arising from this report. Well, I think there are, because the Union flag has always got to fly higher than the Wirral one, where the two are together, something like that. So basically it just symbolises the fact that central government stands very heavily above local government, which is something that not everybody necessarily agrees with. There's not much we can do about it at this moment, but there are views, not just in our particular political group, that would suggest that perhaps local government ought to have a little bit more, genuine devolved power, not just in the gift of the central government. So I just sort of make that point, that there are equality implications, depending on how you look at it, but that's just a statement. It's not, challenging the law. I don't want to be in trouble for sedition or anything like that. Thank you.
Paul Hayes,
That's fine, Chair, and I would make the point that the Union flag doesn't represent the government, it represents the nation, I think, so that's why it gets precedence. But in terms of the other flags, I think the conversation with Councillor Blakely was in relation to St George's flag. Where do we stand on that currently?
Mr. McCourt, I'm sure we've seen it somewhere.
Yes, the St George's flag is flown on St George's Day, so that's its place within our protocol. I didn't see anything particular in the government statements of late, because of course part of this has come from the Secretary of State's comments about more flag flying, without making us like the USA, but a bit more flag flying from civic buildings. And so I didn't see anything in there. That's not to say it's not there and I missed it, but certainly the discussions here and the outcome is St George's flag on St George's Day.
I'd certainly support that continuing.
Possibly certain Euro results, but I'm not sure that's...
Well, I'd certainly support that continuing, Chair. I just wanted to check where we were with that. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Chris Cook again. Thank you.
Sorry, I'd just like to come back on the point that Councillor Hayes said, which is, I think, partially true. The Union flag is meant to represent not the nation, but the United Kingdom, and therefore it should represent all of the nations that make up the United Kingdom. And it doesn't represent Wales, for example, because it had already been designed when Wales joined. So, yeah, it's just a technical point. But if we're going to have a Union Jack or flag, perhaps it should be a Union Jack because we're near the sea. That's another point. But perhaps it should represent all the nations, so long as there is a United Kingdom. Just a point on that.
So now look what you've done. You've got Adrian and Chris really excited. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. As a point of flippancy, I think Councillor Cook's suggesting we should fly the Welsh flag as well as the Union flag. Is that at which point would it sit on the mast? Would it be above the Union flag or below? Or
I think we're beginning to have drift a bit on this one. As they stand, the history lesson, thank you, Councillor Cook, reminded me of a few things. I suppose somebody had to take a decision in 1708 or whenever it was. I wondered if I might move from the chair then that this committee sees no immediate need to review the protocol adopted in 2016 and will consider any further government's guidance issued at an appropriate time. Seconded by Councillor Williamson. Yeah, thank you. The members agree with that formula?
Yeah.
Officers captured that? Yeah, thank you very much. Right.
Chair.
Sorry, Chair, just to say we will bring something up, because obviously there are some changes, the government guidance, and also mention of the European Union flag and so forth. So there are some changes required.
Yes.
So if we could suggest that you ask Mr. Fox to undertake some work and bring a report back, but not to put it to a group.
Well, as I think I moved from memory at the appropriate time, and that can encompass what you've just suggested. If I may.
Chair.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Phillips.
We live in a very, flexible world, and I'm glad you've made the resolution out, but there will be ad hoc requests for flags to be flown. For example, if England get to the European Nations Cup final, there will be a request, because it happens to mayors all the time. If we're in the final, can we fly the flag on the day? And I think we have to have a bit of common sense about it, of what's happening in the world at any one point in time. But this protocol seems fit for purpose, and I think I've read it that there is some leeway for the mayor and the leaders to come together if England get to the final, or indeed Wales. They're still in the competition. Poor old Scotland won't be there, I'm afraid. And if Everton eventually get a manager, can we fly a flag then as well, please? So.
Right. It's good that we can have these lighter moments. Yes, right. I'm going to move on to item 9 about the principles of established working groups. Now, I read this report and it raises issues of members' time, issues of officer time, and also makes some suggestions about how committees might cope in future. I did, in conversation with an officer, express some concern that if there were a limit of 2 placed on a committee, but I think there's some flexibility for that. Clearly, some committees have got workloads and things their members want to achieve, but in so doing, they have to bear in mind the pressure on officers and perhaps prioritise what they want to do. But I'm pinching Mr. Fox's thunder at the moment, so if you'd like to come in and outline it, please.
Yes, I'll just do a brief introduction, if I may, Chair. I think the rationale behind the report really does relate to the comments that have been made by some members this evening, started by Councillor Foulkes and picked up on by others. I mean, the first thing I'd say is they are guiding principles, and it's, policy committees and in particular members may wish to consider when determining if they want to hold a task and finish group. But it's very much designed to supplement what's already in the Constitution, and the guidance in there is that there should be only 2 at any one given time, unless there is exceptional circumstances to have more. What I would say is I think it's worth noting that since the commencement of the committee system in September, there's been an excess of 60 working and task and finish group meetings already. And I think that's to be applauded. They were there to support the budget setting process, and they've certainly contributed to other policy development work. But that's 60 additional meetings already over and above what's already, a busy committee programme. So I think, subject to any comments that members may have, I hope you see this as a useful tool to share with your colleagues at the policy committees, and to assist them when making a decision whether they wish to hold a working group or a task and finish group. The recommendations are for you to note and comment on the report, and then secondly, if you are happy to agree that they be circulated to the policy chairs and group spokes, as well as senior officers, I should add, when determining whether to hold a task and finish group. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Fox, I'll just see if members got any comments. Councillor Paul Hayes, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. No real issue with this. I have had issues in the past with task and finish groups and other meetings that are perhaps held behind closed doors, and that is that maybe an accountability and a democracy question here, insofar as if these important decisions are being made behind closed doors without the viewing of the public, without the public being able to take part, then that does become an issue. I know that's not present here in this document, so that is perhaps a bit disappointing to me, but I'm sure members can make those points when the task and finish groups or the meetings are set up by the relevant committees.
Thank you for that. I just want to reflect on that. The purpose of the working groups is to explore things. The working task and finish groups, their proceedings are always reported somewhere else, so they're not decision-making bodies. Let's just check on that, please, Mr. McCord.
Yes, Chair. It's in, I believe it's in the Constitution, but it can be reiterated here what the purpose of a working group or a workshop is, which is to support deliberation and blue sky thinking, but actually, to say that decisions and the reasons for decisions should be open and transparent, and therefore communicated to the parent committee making the decision in that light.
Councillor Williams. Janet, you indicated, please.
It's just on that point, really, so thank you for confirming that decisions don't get taken in working groups. I don't think it's helpful to use phrases like behind closed doors, decisions being taken without the public being part of them, because members have to have a space where they can speak freely and discuss controversial issues, and that's what we're partially what working groups achieve. So I think that Councillor Hayes, to say, imply that these groups are secret and behind closed doors, they're just not filmed, or they don't involve the public. Not every meeting needs to do that, especially ones that don't involve decisions. So I would say my own opinion is not much of a problem with this. Maybe think on about, you said that 60 and that was a good thing, Steve. I was quite shocked at that number, really. I think that's a lot. And I think that if something sits quite comfortably in a committee that can go through the committee, then we don't have to always have a working group, but I do understand their role and purpose.
So before I call Councillor Tony Cox, Mr McCourt is very anxious to just add something.
I am, Chair, and I'd like to check with members whether you believe this is sufficient, because this is the wording that's in there at the moment, which is to say, I quote, the purpose of such working groups is to examine in detail specific issues or aspects of policy, procedure or service according to their remit. These groups do not take any decisions, but inform the deliberations of the committees. I believe that somewhat summarises it, but obviously we can add further wording if members consider
Right,
it.
thank you for that, Mr McCourt. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on what Phil's just said there. At the risk of sounding like a stuck record, and this one has come up on a couple of occasions, and you know, I've reiterated, particularly on the Environment Committee, I might add, that the working groups were, I think I was chastised for using the word talking shops, if I recall correctly, but effectively, they are behind closed doors. They might not be clandestine, but they are behind closed doors and not in public. And I think we had agreement from all parties at the recent working group just last week, I think it was, of Standards and Constitution and Standards Committee, that it should be kept to a minimum, because the whole point of the exercise of going to the new governance form was for things to be more transparent, because it was been deemed, or it was viewed, that the cabinet system was not transparent. So just to pick up on what Jeanette said, yes, you're correct, Jeanette, that they're not decision-making committees, because they're not statutory. However, certain chairs of certain committees wanted as many things as possible ironed out in working groups before we got to the committee stage, which basically is making decisions behind closed doors. We can have a outline agreements on something, but that does not mean that it's cut and dried. And certain chairs took objection when a debate was opened up again on what was deemed to have been agreed, in inverted commas, behind closed doors, and that's exactly what we need to get away from. So, correct, they're not decision-making committees, and I think that's something that needs to be reiterated to members as well, rather than trying to use them like that.
Well, thank you for that. Well, I've not seen, not that I move in these circles, but I haven't noticed the boards of large companies operating in Wirral opening their doors to members of the public to come and see what strategic decisions local industries and businesses are making. And those proceedings go to their boards and their shareholders and perhaps an annual meeting. We are rather different because we work through everything as best we can. And in terms of meeting prior and going through things, it's worthwhile trying to see how the land lies and see what's possible, especially in the difficult budget situation we are, so that where things can be achieved or secured, then progress is made without devoting unnecessary time to going over the same things over again. Where the facts change, as I think Maynard Cade said, when the facts change, I can change my mind or look at them afresh. But you know, there's always been a lot of work done over the 40 years I've been involved between chairs of committees and spokespersons to talk through issues and see what can and can't be done in the circumstances we face. And it's right to put a marker down that doesn't fix things. It just sees what can be achieved and how things can be secured to try and make the best job we can for the people of Wirral. No. Not a, you'll forgive me for replying to that. Not a talking shop, a way of working that helps issues be resolved or progressed and brought to the best conclusion possible in the circumstances that we all face. Janet.
I think Councillor Cox and I are in partial agreement, but for different reasons here. I would also say that I'm uncomfortable with speaking about any chair whilst they haven't been named. It wouldn't take Sherlock Holmes to work out who you're talking about, and I don't think that's right or appropriate in this committee, which is one which is being viewed by the public, particularly with some of the remarks that have been associated with that chair.
Thank you. Point taken. We were discussing the pressures on officers, the pressures on members. I raised some concerns about the issue of 2, which is mentioned on page 71. I have a formula which, if the committee is interested in, I'll suggest it instead, where on page 71 it talks about limited to 2 such committees at any one time. I'd prefer to say something like they should carefully consider how many members and officers can manage. So I haven't put a limit on 2, but I've asked committees to think carefully. Is that formula something that members would be appreciative of, or would they want to stick with the idea of 2 that's been put forward? Can I hear comments on that, please? Councillor Hayes, yeah.
I think 2 is an appropriate number, Chair. I know we don't want to limit what the committee can do, but it seems to be that is the officer's opinion as to capacity at the moment, so I'd go with that. And I think in terms of the quality of the committee's work and how they can focus their attention, then 2 is probably the correct number.
Right. Councillor Cook?
Yeah, I agree with that too. 2 is probably, a suitable number to be going on at the same time, and it could provide an incentive to make them task and finish as far as possible so they don't go on and on. I mean, going back to the Environment Committee, I just wanted to make this point that the remit is the terms of reference are extremely broad. They cover an awful lot of ground, and I've been a member of all of the working groups to discuss various issues. And if you take, for example, something like road safety, part of the purpose of that really was to invite experts to submit their views and information on things to actually inform the members so they could form their views. It wasn't sort of already entrenched political views that people could know instinctively outset. It was very subtle matters that really opinions could only be formed properly, by attending those working groups. So I think that really does have to go on, behind closed doors, if you like. And as Councillor, Leader of the Council, Williamson said, that, people need a safe space to be able to air views and sometimes play devil's advocate in some cases, and just sound other members out. But going back to the idea of, for example, one particular committee, want to get everything sorted out in advance of the public committee meeting. Well, I mean, the Environment Committee, the last one was over 3 hours, and the one before that was over 5 hours. So, in practical terms, as much as humanly possible was discussed in public, go beyond that and coming to the floral pavilion, how are you going to get home? You know what I mean? There's got to be a certain amount of discussion and preliminary decision making going on at some of these working groups, I feel. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm just taking any further comments on the issue of 2 versus anything else. Councillor Fox.
As someone who tried to contribute to working, sub-working groups and so on, I found it very difficult because they are off committee line. The actual timing of them is even more difficult. So you when you thought you had some spare time, someone comes up with another working group, and there you are, another 2 hours doing that. But there are certain issues of highly technical nature that do need a smaller subgroup for the reasons Councillor Cook talks about. If we meet at 6 o'clock, a reasonable time to get home should be 8, 9 o'clock. No, most big boards will say anything after 3 hours, you stop functioning. So I think we are limited by time, but there's some real, like the local plan subgroup we set up to look at the policies backing up the local plan. If we'd done that, and we did try to do that in public as well, but it was meeting on a fortnightly basis throughout the year. But we did it. Where it's applicable, we can do that sort of public thing. But when it's highly technical and you're trying to decant reams and reams of information to something that group can then recommend to the whole committee. And at the end of the day, if as we've seen, if the political will is not to agree with the findings of the working group, that groups quite clearly use their political nous or instruction and vote against it, even though members of their committee, members of their group have agreed with the recommendations. It's not a be all and end all, but it does help the system. So I think we've got to find a reasonable balance and putting some sort of strictures on them. If you look at most committees' work programmes as well, Chair, they put far too much in. They put 6 to 12 items, and we meet 4 times a year as a committee. It's almost impossible. We all want our bit of the work programme. And again, that's where we should be a bit more strict as well, prioritise what we need to do. But we'll get better, and we're helping us get better. That's what I guess this committee's all about, is getting us better at doing these sort of things. So to put some control on it, I think is okay. So I would agree with the sentiment I think around the table is that we'll go with this report as is rather than playing.
Well, thank you for that, Councillor Fox. I judge the mood of the committee is to go with the document as it is. Mr McCourt is looking relieved. Might wish to make a comment.
No, I'm quite happy to do as you asked, Chair. It's always just about the resources then to back it up.
Yes.
Just to say that that note is a reflection of what's in the Constitution, so were you to move away from 2, it would actually be a recommendation to change the Constitution.
Oh dear, right.
And that picks up again Councillor Hayes' comment from earlier on, so if I just read it back to you. Working groups, review teams, advisory groups may be established by a committee from time to time to develop recommendations or investigate issues of interest or concern alongside formal committees. They shall be for specific purposes and shall be time limited. They will only be established when the matter cannot be undertaken by a relevant committee, and each committee is limited to establishing 2 such committees at any one time. Now that was a recommendation that came from this committee earlier in the year and ended up in the Constitution at the time of drafting, and I noticed the square brackets of question mark around the 2 carried forward because I know it was an issue for debate to be continued. So it's just noting that you've continued the debate here and you may wish to revisit again in the future. But note what I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr McCourt. Oh, well, as any gardener knows, you prepare the ground well before you start planting things. So, Jeanette, yes, you're right. So, members have got recommendation then, which were to agree the guiding principles for establishing a working group or task and finish group. It's been that should be circulated to all policy committee chairs and group spokespersons and senior officers to assist them when determining if they wish to establish such groups. We've had a good debate about this. So is that the view of the committee that should happen? Yep. Can I see members in favour, please? Yep. Right. Thank you very much. So we've done that part, and I think item 10 is the establishment of panels, statutory advisory committees and working parties. Yes, and earlier Councillor Fox referred specifically, and others members do too, the pressure and strain on members, and that was something that we agreed to pick up as part of this item as one of the groups that we're considering.
Yes, so the recommendation as it stands is in the report before you, which is simply to authorise me to receive the names from the groups, but to point out from the conversation earlier on that paragraph 4.1 actually relays back what the role of the group is at the moment, and picking up the conversation from earlier, it may be a suggestion from me that members may wish to include a specific extra bullet point that that states provide an overview of support to members in fulfilling their roles and duties as councillors.
Right. So
Over to you.
thank you for that note, Mr. McCord. That
Chair?
encapsulates it.
Just a quick question for Mr. McCall, because the role of the group is there. Phil, does that actually appear in the Constitution? Because I don't recall this being mentioned, and should it be? If we're going to make it a bit more formal, as in, okay, it's ICT and support training, if we're going to say it needs oversight for support for members' well-being as well, does it need to be formalised?
If I may, Chair, the place to do that is within this committee, because just reel back to your previous discussion just now, this is a working group. So the role sits with this committee. That's the formal bit in the Constitution. At the moment, that's picked up within the terms of reference for this working group, which at the moment it merely says, ensure all members have the requisite skills, knowledge and attributes to be able to meet their varied duties and responsibilities. Now, one might argue that support for councillors, so one of those attributes is not to fall over because of the sheer pressure of work and so forth. So one might argue it's there implicitly at the moment. This is just about putting that in an express way, but it falls to this committee as is your working group. So you may wish to say, just put it there, or and bring back X, Y, and Z to this as the parent committee.
I think that covers the point, and Councillor Cox appears satisfied. I suppose in connection with that bullet point, Mr. McCourt, I think you probably add, after the knowledge and attributes, you put in something like support and capacity, which probably encapsulates it, but you've given us a formula for what you think should be added. So do you want to just repeat that so everyone's clear?
Certainly, Chair. It is provide an overview of support to members in fulfilling their roles and duties as councillors.
Members content with that addition to the bullet points? Yep. Yeah. So thank you. Two aspects. One is to set up the standards panel and the standards appeal panel. Details are given there with suggested size and members' content. That's in paragraph 3.2. Happy to approve that part? Yep. And then secondly, we've covered the bullet points about the member support steering group. So we also have been asked, according to this note, to request to authorise the monitoring officer as proper officer to carry out the wishes of the group leaders in allocating members to membership of the statutory and advisory committees listed in the report, and to appoint those members with effect from the date at which the proper officer is advised of the names of such members. So that's what we're doing as well, and that's agreeable to all members? Yep. We get agreement? Yep. All right. Shall I move that from the chair? And Mr. Sharples will be happy if we have a seconder, and then we formally record that. Councillor Fowkes seconding. All members in agreement? Yep. Yes? Yes, thanks very much. Have we done everything that was on the official agenda? There been no any other business or anything like that? Yep, we've concluded everything.
No, Chair, and it'd be remiss of me to say there's no such thing as an unofficial agenda.
Quite. No closed secret meetings. Right, yes, everything that was on the published agenda we have completed. Thank you, members, for their attendance, and especially our independent members who came along. And thank you for